So I'm hyperventilating a little bit. If I fall over, pick me up because I've got some things to say.
Though we adore men individually, we agree that as a group they're rather stupid.
That men are essential for procreation, but when it comes to pleasure, unnecessary.
Dinosaurs eat man. Woman inherits the earth.
Safety lights are for dudes.
Safety lights are for dudes.
Well, put some skates on. Be your own hero.
Hands in the air, Kristen.
Lord.
Please give it up for the dazzling vocal stylings of Miss Kimberly.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Citizen Dame, the first Citizen Dame episode recorded in the new year, the first episode of 2020. I am Lauren Humphries Brooks, and with me, as always, is Karen Peterson.
Hello.
And how are you doing, Karen? How has your holiday been?
You know, it's been pretty nice. I didn't do a dang thing, and that was wonderful.
Yes, that is always fun.
Yeah. Sometimes you just really need a break.
Yeah, exactly. For the most part, I did that. Unfortunately, I've had to start working again because, I have to make money and stuff like that, which is stupid.
I know. I go back on Monday. I'm really bummed about it. My coworker texted me this morning. He goes, "I'm really upset that I have to work on Monday." And I'm like, yeah, me too.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's that sense of but do I have to, do we really have to work? Is this not... Let's talk about this here. None of us want to, so maybe.
Let's just not.
Yes, let's just not. I agree. But we are also going to have a little bit of fun today, and we're going to talk about some interesting things. No garbage people right now, although I'm certain that we could bring up someone or something, but I don't want to. Let's just keep the holiday chillness going for a little while longer.
Oh, although I will mention that speaking of things that are happening on Monday, Harvey Weinstein's trial starts.
Yes, and recently there were several of his accusers who refused to sign the civil settlement.
Yes,
which is interesting. So it's this is gonna be ugly when it comes right down to it. This isn't gonna be a fun time, but it will be interesting certainly.
Yeah, they said that it lets him off the hook too easily, and they didn't want to be part of it. And I just say, yes, thank you, good. Yeah,
good for them. And that's very brave of them to do also. That's not something that's not easy to do. They could just basically, largely walk away from this after it's consumed so much of them. But they're actually really standing up, and that's quite brave of them. To a very powerful man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be terrifying.
So, all right, so let's talk about some interesting things that have gone on. Let's start with the happy stuff. I'm going to start with, some of the good things that are happening. One of the things that was recently published in The Hollywood Reporter is a report from San Diego State University that found that women accounted for 21% of all directors, writers, producers, executive producers, editors, and cinematographers working on the top 250 films. This is a slight improvement over the 20% number of 2018. So this is solely in reference to the top 250 top grossing films of 2019. Female directors helmed 12% of the top 100 grossing films, which is really up from 4% in 2018 and 8% in 2017. So inching up there. And of course, this was a year that saw the release of Little Women, Hustlers, Booksmart, The Farewell, Queen and Slim. Next year we're also going to see the release of Wonder Woman, which is almost undoubtedly going to be in the top 100, and just in terms of grossing. So this is good. It's incremental. And one of the things that the article points out is that, in addition to the fact that the women are taking on these major roles behind the scenes, when women take on major roles behind the scenes, they also employ other women. Right. So 59% of films directed by women also have a female writer. So there's so there's been a really good increase in, as female directors and female writers and producers begin to get more power, we're also seeing more and more women being employed below the line because women employ women. This is a good thing, but also, 21% it should be at least 50, shouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that's the percentage that's coming out of film school, so what does it tell you that we're still so far down?
Yeah. And of course, and this is only addressing the really high grossing films, so we're not really talking about any of the smaller films or anything like that. But I don't know. I find it kind of heartening. I mean, it's good to see that we're moving in the right direction, at least. I feel like we're always taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but we're moving up a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
one thing that I do wish, and someone else had pointed this out to me, is that it doesn't really break down what the stats look like when you start to go just beyond women in general and looking at the racial lines, because a lot of those 21% are white women, and so that's great for women coming up, and we're seeing much more movement, but those lines need to start to include more women of color too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am heartened by the fact that people like Lulu Wang she has been so praised for her directing, for the Farewell, and for her writing, and that is very important, and it's good to see. But yeah, absolutely, we're not at parity for white women, and we are really not at parity for non-white women. And
exactly,
that's
yeah.
not a good thing. I actually don't know the statistics in terms of just generally people of color, so male and female, what those statistics look like. I'm willing to bet that it is probably much lower than,
which is why they often
21%.
don't share them, because they don't want us to know how bad it really is, because it is difficult to find that information.
Yeah. So some good things, we still have a very long way to go, and yeah, absolutely, we need more women of color directing, writing, etc. And one of the things that we talked about last week was how good a lot of films have actually been this year. That there've been a lot of different kinds of films in languages other than English that have made serious inroads, that are going to get nominated for Oscars, that have been very popular films at the same time, and that's really wonderful. And some of that, that also gives me hope, because that says that this whole story about middle America, whatever that happens to be, won't go see movies that are not just about straight white men. And it's quite obvious that that's not true, because as these films are beginning to get more and more play, people are going to see them. They're being praised. They're being beloved. They're getting talked about in terms of major awards, which, and we shouldn't base anything on whether or not a film wins an award. There are brilliant films that aren't going to win anything. But the amount of attention that those films get is important. And the fact that it's becoming diversified, very slowly, but still, does say that this is a good thing.
No,
definitely.
But you know what? It's great to see the movement, and to see how far we've come just in the last 10 years, 20 years. And, it'll be great one day to see that those films being recognized. Like you said, I totally agree with you. Awards don't measure a film's quality completely. There are a lot of really great films that never come close to awards consideration. But it also will be great when we get to a point where it's not weird or unusual to have one female director nominated. It's going to be 2 and 3 sometimes, and a very nice mix that will feel like, yes, this does represent the best of the films that were out this year that we're celebrating. We'll get to that point eventually.
Eventually. Every time we get a little bit of a crumb of hope about these things, I'm like, yes, we went up 1%. That's right. We didn't go down. Yes, absolutely. On the not so great side, I struggle with whether or not I wanted to talk about this, but the fact was there's so many people that were saying, "Oh, this makes total sense." I'm just like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. We're not going to let them off the hook for this one. So the writer of Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, screenwriter Chris Terrio, in an interview with Awards Daily, unpacked why this is from a Vulture article. He unpacked why he and fellow screenwriter J.J. Abrams were required to minimize the role of Rose Tico, who is played by Kelly Marie Tran in the Star Wars series. And his explanation was one of the reasons, this is a direct quote from him, one of the reasons that Rose has a few less scenes than we would like her to have has to do with the difficulty of using Carrie Fisher's footage in the way we wanted to. We wanted Rose to be the anchor at the Rebel base who was with Leia. We thought we couldn't leave Leia at the base without any of the principles we love, so Leia and Rose were working together. The last thing we were doing was deliberately trying to sideline Rose. We adore the character and we adore Kelly, so much so that we anchored her with our favorite person in this galaxy, General Leia. It's interesting how he repeats this several times. We love these characters. Oh, the women, man. The women are fantastic.
Bullshit.
Well, he later clarified that because it seemed like he was implying that the problem had to do with the CGI for Carrie Fisher's character. To put Rose and Leia together. And obviously trying not to blame the VFX team, he later said that I badly misspoke. In an earlier statement, I implied that any cutscenes between Rose and Leia were the fault of our VFX team and the wizards at ILM. I was referring to a specific scene in which Leia's emotional state in Episode 7 did not seem to match the scene we wrote for use in Episode 9. And so it was cut at the script stage. So he's arguing that they also made changes to the script, obviously as a result of Carrie Fisher's death. Now, there are many issues with the way that this guy has tried to excuse the sidelining of Rose in this film. But the fact that he's like, that he blames the deceased actress who plays Leia, that he blames a dead woman for, well, the reason why this character that we totally love got sidelined is because Carrie Fisher died.
Well, she shouldn't have had a lifetime of difficulties and gotten hooked on drugs. This is entirely her fault. How dare she?
Yeah. This was this was bullshit. And I know that it recently came out that, Kelly Marie Tran's character has 1.5 minutes of screen time, something like that.
Yeah, 1 minute and 16 seconds, I believe, is the official total. Which is
less time than her, dead sister had in The Last Jedi.
Yep. Her sister, I think her screen time was 1:45 or something like that.
I mean, and the fact is, if this was someone if this was John Boyega or if this was Oscar Isaac and this was the argument that they were making, it would still be kind of bullshit. But the fact that this is specifically about one of the characters that was viciously attacked by fanboys in the release of The Last Jedi, I call bullshit. This isn't right. And also, how dare you blame Carrie Fisher? Mm-hmm. How dare you?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of problems with this. First of all, you can write the movie any way that you want to. And to sit there and say, well, we're trying to anchor her to Leia. Okay, first of all, obviously that's just a big fat excuse. But there are ways to give her that without her having to be in specific scenes always with Leia. She was given an assignment, and her excuse to Finn as to why she can't go with them while they're, trying to find their thing that they're looking for. The whole reason that she says she can't go is because Leia wants her to go through a bunch of blueprints, which, okay, really, that's the big assignment they gave her. But still, that means that she's got stuff to do. That doesn't mean she has to constantly be in a room with Leia all the time. So there are ways to give her scenes and give her a story that don't involve having to use this old footage, first of all. Second of all, when we first catch up with these guys, we meet up with Finn and Poe in the middle of a mission. Rey isn't with them either. But there's some slug guy that we've never seen before that's not a real person it's just some creature. We don't know anything about this person. Why wasn't Rose with them on that trip? Like, even little things like that throughout the movie, it would have been so easy for them to include her. And so it all just adds up to making this excuse feel more bullshit than it even already was. And it's so ridiculous and so insulting. And the real problem that they just can't admit to, because it's Disney, they cannot admit that the real problem is that they gave in to the fans. The whiny fanboys who just hated Rose. And so what they ultimately did was Jar Jar Binksed her.
Yeah, and I have to say, I'm not someone who is a huge Star Wars fan. I enjoy the films. I like going to see them and everything. One of the things I actually really liked about The Last Jedi is that there was this character who was different. That she felt like she wasn't a copy in some ways of previous characters. And in many ways, one of the problems that I've had with these films has been the way that they've structured them so closely to the original trilogy. Mm-hmm. And Rose was a departure from that. It was like, oh, rather than having this triumvirate, we're going to have like this group of 4. And they can all have these adventures. And this is someone who, she was an interesting character. I was interested in her as like a person in ways that I have to admit, I wasn't that interested in Rey, because I felt like she was just kind of like Luke, but not. And Rose, I was actually like, oh, she's interesting, and she's not like fucking toxic masculinity like Poe. Right. So it's really disappointing that they did this, and I don't think that this in any way undercuts the fact that they basically, like you're saying, they gave in to the fans. They gave in to all of the angry boys who just like, and again, it's basically how dare this girl get to play with Star Wars, basically. And another reason that all of these excuses are bullshit is because right before they started the screenings and right before even the cast got to see the movie, there was an interview that Kelly Marie Tran gave where someone asked her what she was, it might have actually been at the press conference. No, she'd already seen the movie at the press conference. But someone asked her what she was really excited for the fans to see. And she said she was really looking forward to them getting to see her and Rey interact and that friendship that forms. So I'm like, that's interesting. Where are those scenes? They filmed them. They exist. And I can just imagine the devastation for Kelly Marie Tran when she's there watching the movie with her castmates and her director and the writer and the producers, and she's so excited, and then she sees what happened to her character. Like, how do you just sit there and watch that, knowing that there are these scenes you're so excited about, and none of it makes it in, and not only that, but your character's completely sidelined. There are hints at, like, a love triangle that never go anywhere at all. There are hints at, big opportunities and things for your character to do that aren't even touched upon. And then that's it. There's just nothing. We don't even really get to see any sort of a conclusion for Rose. In the end final montage, they're showing all these people, and it's like, where's Rose's hug of celebration? Where's any of this for her? And it just, oh man, it just makes me so angry. And I'm someone who didn't hate Rise of Skywalker. I thought it was actually okay. I didn't love it. It's definitely not my favorite, but I didn't think it was terrible. I don't think any of these movies are terrible, even the Attack of the Clones. So, which is why I'm not a real fan, because I don't hate them. Well, we got to talk about Attack of the Clones sometime.
I just can never remember what it's about. That's why I don't hate it.
I have no idea what it's about. Nope. I've seen it twice. I don't know what it's about.
Oh, I've seen it like 10 times. I always forget the plot as soon as it's over. But it's just I enjoy the process of watching them. I enjoy the time I spend watching them, and it doesn't mean that I won't defend every one of them as being great. I would never do that. Some of them are, some of them aren't, but I still like them. And Rise of Skywalker I liked.
You're the second Star Wars fan actually that I've spoken to who's like has a soft spot for Attack of the Clones, and I find that really interesting. And the thing is, like, I am not in love with Star Wars. Like, I enjoy it, it's fine, whatever. Attack of the Clones to me was just like, this is one of the worst movies I have seen. Like, and again, I absolutely agree. I don't remember what it's about. I don't know what most of the prequel series is about. But I find it interesting that it seems to like have touched something in some Star Wars fans. And you're just like, I enjoyed this, even though I don't know why.
Yeah. Like, I'll watch it when it's on. I think I just love the Yoda battle. It's pretty great.
Yeah, that's true. The Yoda battle is pretty cool.
Uh-huh.
I have to give credit to that.
Yeah. But anyway, Chris Terrio's full of shit, and I wish that they would either tell the truth or stop talking.
Yeah, I mean, and you kind of expect that this sort of thing was going to come up, given that this is a major criticism of Rise of Skywalker, and people noticed it. And so of course they were good, and I'm certain that they prepared their talking points on it and everything. And so in some ways he's constrained to a certain degree by the truth versus not really being able to say what the truth is. But yeah, it's bullshit. And I do want to say, I like Rose, and I think that really the only one of this series that I actually want to go back and watch is The Last Jedi. So take that as you will. Obviously, I'm not a real fan because I've only seen Star Wars movies.
Right.
I haven't read any of the books or played the video games or
How dare
participated in discussion boards or anything like that.
But have you ever used a flashlight as a lightsaber?
No, but when I was a kid... Okay, but when I was a kid, I had these, like, Nerf swords.
Mm-hmm.
That were, Nerf, and my parents very intelligently got me 2 Nerf swords, and I used to pretend that those were lightsabers. So
there you go.
Count?
That counts. That counts. Sorry, Dr. Ed, you lose.
I can't believe that dude's a doctor.
Oh my gosh, I don't believe that dude's a doctor. I want to see his diploma.
For those who are not on Twitter and are not paying attention to that wonderful, wonderful place. There was a guy who basically said that you're not a real Star Wars fan if you've only seen the Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
You have to like read all of the books and the extended universe and like a whole bunch of other things. And I was just like, man, like, Siri, show me what a gatekeeper is.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Oh, that guy.
So, well, since we're talking about fandom...
Yes.
This is an interesting question. We did get a question/topic from Keith Derrick at KH Derrick. I wanted to talk about an article that was on Gizmodo entitled... Let me see if I can pull up the title again. The Decade Fandom Went Corporate. And... this article covers a lot of different things about kind of the corporatization of fandom and a lot of what we're talking about right now, the power of the fan and this whole idea about brand loyalty. So, and we've seen a lot of it this year, actually. We've seen, the arguments about Disney, Marvel, and Scorsese's comments about superhero films. All of that stuff, this tendency of fans to identify with the brand of their fandom. And this article goes really in depth into a whole bunch of different things. It talks about curative fandom versus transformative fandom. Curative being stuff like, it's generally considered to be more male fandom. So stuff like memorizing trivia, buying collectibles, going to fan conventions, stuff like that. So this whole concept of consuming things. And transformative are things like the fan art, fan works, fan fiction, the kind of creating something out of fandom that is based within the fandom, but is also a part of the wider imagination of a group of fans or a person. And I think that transformative fandom tends to be more related to women and just generally to more marginalized communities. Partially because for so long there's been very little representation that women or minorities can identify with. So, you know, if the only thing that you get is the background person, you're just like, well, I'm going to write a story about that background person because that background person actually looks like me. And then you've also got issues about canon versus fanon and all of that stuff. So this article goes really into depth, but it's particularly talking about the way that corporations have kind of begun to own fandom in the past decade. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting issue. It's one that, you know, I've noticed. What Keith was asking about specifically was whether or not the corporate co-opting of fandom might lead to a greater spotlight on issues of sexual abuse within fandom communities, or if it's actually just going to, you know, create wider problems because you've got this kind of polarization going on within fandom, which has always been there, but is now happening very publicly and is now also, in a certain sense, being supported by corporations and creatives. So I don't know if you had any thoughts about this, Karen. I have a few thoughts, but they're not completely formed.
Same. And I read the article just before we started recording, and I don't know much of, and I don't condemn capitalism as a total evil. I know you do, but I think
it's what we have right now, so.
Right, and I think that there are good and bad things about it, but the thing is that it in itself, the principle of capitalism isn't the thing that's evil, it's the people that use it and how they wield the power that they have because of it. And I don't know of any situation in which corporations have made the problem of pervasive sexual abuse and harassment better. So I don't know how. So I don't know how corporations taking over and driving fandoms is going to help that issue. To me, it seems like it would make things the same or worse.
Yeah,
I mean, are they? I don't think the corporations, not that they don't care, but really they don't care. That's not their issue, and that's not what they're dealing with. And so who would be then policing it? The corporations aren't going to.
Yeah, and I mean, I know I'm not one of those people who goes to a lot of fan conventions or anything like that. That's just not my scene. And most of the things that I'm a fan of are so obscure that it's like me and two other people.
Right. I just found someone today who saw the movie 71, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love that movie. Let's talk about it.
See, you know, like, this is why I have a very good experience on Tumblr, because I follow like 5 people and interact with 3. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's very nice and insular. And even we have drama sometimes.
Of course.
But, you know, so it's not an issue of conventions. But one of the things I just thought of in terms of the conventions is that there has been for a long time this idea of the in-group and the out-group mm-hmm. in fan conventions. And, of course, now, and the article actually mentions Twilight, and that Twilight brought a lot of girls and teenage girls to fan conventions.
Right.
Because this was something that really appealed to them. And there was a whole lot. I even remember, like, Kevin Smith weighing in about it. Kevin Smith being like, dudes, why are you mad that there are girls?
Right,
and
yeah.
like, that was his response. Just like, for once, girls actually might be interested in something that you have to say. Like,
yeah,
don't harass them out of it. But...
Oh, I remember the very first time I went to San Diego Comic-Con. I just went there for one day. I had like a one-day pass. I went down to San Diego, hung out. I got into the panel that I wanted, and it was pretty much the first panel of the day, and then I just left, which once you get into that big Hall H, you can stay the whole day if you want to. But I left after that, and the one that was coming in next was Twilight, and people were so pissed about it. Why is Twilight here? They shouldn't be at Comic-Con. And it's like, even just this last year, 12 years later or something, I was there, and it was like, I was seeing girls, you know, in all kinds of stuff. And it's like, yeah, because, like you say, because that door was opened for them with mm-hmm. Twilight when they started being welcomed and included at these conventions. And now they're in all sorts of fandoms You know, some of it's still Twilight adjacent, some of it's complete offshoots, but it's because they now feel like they're part of this, you know, whole community.
Yeah, and that's a positive side, but on the other side, I think that this has also created a lot of problems. And
of course it has.
This of course, this insularity and this desire to protect.
Mm-hmm.
And to protect, and one of the things that the article also mentions, and this ties in with harassment and with what we were talking about with Kelly Marie Tran. So, you know, I mentioned canon versus fanon. And the difference between what is canonical in a fandom, so what is actually contained within the film or the comic book or whatever else, and what, you know, becomes something that is spun out of it, and that it's transformed into. And so you get, you know, the fans bullying Kelly Marie Tran, and then suddenly her character is reduced to almost nothing in the next film. Mm-hmm. You get people like the Russo brothers or Zack Snyder, etc., making pronouncements, or even people like J.K. Rowling making pronouncements on Twitter or on social media or in an interview saying this is the way that it is and this is how you're supposed to interpret it. And fans using that to basically say to other fans, you're not allowed to look at this in any way other than the way that I look at it because Zack Snyder says so.
Right.
And
if you don't consume it the way that I do, and if you don't reach the same conclusions that I do, then you're not only are you doing it wrong, but you're not a fan and you don't count.
Yeah, exactly. And now, of course, you know, and we could get into the discussions of toxic masculinity and what this represents, but this idea that fans for a very long time were sidelined and were considered, it was the nerd community, right? Mm-hmm. And were considered to be, you know, at least by the wider culture in a certain sense, lesser. Now you're getting a lot more people coming into fandoms and proclaiming themselves fans. Everyone from, you know, little kids who are 5 years old right now to 55-year-old women. And those spaces are being invaded, and in in certain fans' minds, they're being co-opted. They're losing something, and what they're really losing is the control over this product that really never belonged to them.
Right.
But corporations do seem to be reinforcing this. So you've got people like Zack Snyder, you know, constantly, and a lot of the people who work for DC constantly tweeting about the Snyder Cut.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, yeah. It was bad enough when the boys were doing it, and some girls, but when you actually got people like Gal Gadot, I was like, darling, honey, what are you doing? Stop this nonsense. Like that day that they all started tweeting it, and it was like, you don't understand what you're feeding by doing this.
Yeah, it's corporatization. It is this like, oh, we're ramping up sort of fan attention, and it gets them attention, absolutely, and it gets DC attention. Whether or not it's a real thing, and like at this point, I'm just like, oh my god, if it's real, can you please just release this so that it can all be over? Mm-hmm. Just please, like, I can't hear about it anymore.
Exactly.
But so I don't know. It's a really complicated issue, and in terms of Keith's question, I do agree with you. I don't think that this is the corporatization of it is not going to make it safer. Ultimately,
I think that certain things like sorry, I just lost the word. Conventions. I think that those have become so big and so just so expansive that, like, what are the corporations even supposed to do about those? How can they stop harassment and other things at one of their events? I mean, they can't control everything that happens outside of, you know, the showroom or their big convention halls and things, you know, like there's so much of what happens at those things can't even be blamed on a convention or on the people that host it. It's, you know, there's just a lot of other, like, that's the thing. I don't understand how corporations could help fix that problem in the first place.
I mean, one of the things, you know, beyond having security and stuff like that, and no tolerance policies.
Yeah, banning people when they're found to be doing, you know, bad and abusive and violent things is a start, I guess, but that's not going to stop it either.
But one of the things I think that we've talked about this a couple of times. We've talked about it with Zack Snyder fans and DC fans, and again, I'm not saying that everybody who's a fan of DC is this kind of a person, but there does seem to be certain fandoms that are more inherently toxic than others.
Yeah.
And I think that some of that is an encouragement of toxicity coming from the corporate accounts, coming from people like Snyder or people like J.J. Abrams, who are almost promoting this headbutting between fans of like we have to fight it out, and it's because they're getting publicity as a result of it. They're getting, if everybody is talking about release the Snyder Cut, they're talking about DC films.
Right.
Constantly. They're getting a lot of what is basically free publicity from all of these fans who are getting really, really into their fandom. But it's a toxic relationship. So one of the things the corporations could do is actually encourage transformative fandom more and say, like, we want to encourage people to expand outward, not just be like, we have to see this one thing that is just like the holy grail of our fandom, but actually to be like, we want you to create more things. Mm-hmm. and not have it be something necessarily, not like, the Joker fan art competitions, but not necessarily something that they're going to make $1 off of, but actually to encourage fans to interact with one another in a way that is positive and that is not just about everybody fighting it out until everyone is bruised and bloody and doesn't want to play anymore.
Right. It would also be very helpful, honestly, if social media is going to come into play with decisions that are made, whether it be about products to merchandise or characters to add or subtract from a film or plot points or even just movies that are made and TV shows. If fandom is going to be a driving force in those decisions, then the corporations do need to take responsibility to get into those conversations, be a fly on the wall and see what is really happening and really understand what is driving the things that people are asking for and the level of how much of this is fandom and how much of this is racism and sexism and things like that. And then you can avoid situations like what happened to Kelly Marie Tran, who gets sidelined after she was bullied. She was bullied off of social media and then she was bullied out of a movie. Uh-huh. And it's because they took, they knew that had happened to her. It's not that they didn't, but I think that they took the wrong message from some of what the less toxic people were saying. Oh, well, these guys agree. They weren't being mean to her, but they agree that her character wasn't working, so maybe we should do something about that. And that's just one example. But I think that if they're going to make those decisions, they need to invest in having people participate or at least listen to the conversations and really hear how they're going and what people are actually saying before they make a decision on something that's going to affect a product and not feed the trolls, essentially. Yeah, exactly. I think that there are a lot of corporations that are just they don't completely understand the way that the fandom communities actually work. Like the Release the Snyder Cut hashtag. I think that happened because the people involved really didn't understand all the toxicity that is behind that hashtag. Yeah. Yeah, and and there are all sorts of issues that are connected to it. But yeah, I agree. I think that if they invested more in paying attention to that and understanding the way that these communities worked, and it is its own sociology, basically, because it's social media in a lot of ways is still a very, very young thing, and the way that it has changed over the past couple of years even has, it's a massive alteration. But they do need to understand that if they're actually, if they're serious about actually keeping their fans happy, keeping their fans comfortable, continuing to welcome people in, because eventually people are just going to be like, what, it's not worth it. Yeah. It isn't worth the degree of anger and nastiness and cruelty and anything else. And you know what? I don't need to spend my time with Superman. That's not something that I need. And there are a lot of people that are just going to walk away from it in all of its forms. And so they're not going to make money. Yeah.
if that's the final goal, eventually you're going to stop making money.
Exactly.
So, I don't know. It's interesting, but I don't think we're ever going to solve it, to be honest.
No, and one of the things they need to realize, too, one of the things that I thought was interesting when I first watched Rise of Skywalker, I was like, oh, wow, I know a lot of people who are going to be really happy about this movie and a lot of people who are going to be really mad, and a lot of people who are going to feel both. And it's really funny because it was like a lot of people just assumed that if you hated the Last Jedi, you were going to love Rise of Skywalker. But one of the problems is that when you try to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody. And I don't understand why that's such a hard concept for people to get either in terms of who makes these creative choices.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your question, Keith. It's an interesting issue, and yeah, we're not going to solve it here, unfortunately. If it was just up to us, we could probably solve it.
Well, if it was just up to me, I would say, all right, all women are automatically allowed, and men have to apply for admission, and women can be kicked out if they need to be, but we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but a lot of the problem tends to be men.
Yep.
And it's always grown-ass men. It's never like, 8-year-old boys. It's always like 45-year-old men.
Yep, exactly. And then the kids are like, wait, adults are the ones doing that? Technically, yes. Technically, they are adults.
Exactly. So, moving on, let's talk about something fun and happy. Let's talk about movies we are looking forward to this year. It is 2020.
It
is,
what?
I think. It is the roaring 20s. We have so many things to look forward to. At the end of the decade, we're going to have a massive stock market crash, so, we can look forward to that. But before that, we get to have a lot of fun. So, what movies are we just really excited about that are coming out in 2020? I'm going to let you start on this, Karen.
Oh, man. Yeah, so we're foregoing the top 10 thing this year. We're just going to talk about movies we're excited about, right? Because I have like 58. I'm just kidding. I don't have 58. But I
hope not. I do not.
I did narrow down my Sundance list to 43. So, which apparently you can't do in 9 days. I beg to differ. But, yeah, no. My list is a lot of this. My list is mostly going to be studio films just because I don't know what I don't know yet. And so there are a lot of movies I just don't know about, I haven't heard about, that are smaller indie films. There are a few that are going to be at Sundance that I'm looking forward to, like Shirley, which was actually, I think, on Kim's list last year for anticipated films. The one about Shirley Jackson, and that's going to be at Sundance. So I'm really excited about that. And it's directed by Josephine Decker. That's the one with Elizabeth Moss. Yeah, Elizabeth Moss, Michael Stuhlbarg. So I'm excited about that. And The Glorias, which was one that was on my anticipated list. That's about Gloria Steinem. And it's from her memoir. And Julianne Moore and Alicia Vikander both play different versions of her at different points in her life. And that is directed by Julie Taymor. So that one I'm looking forward to. And then also another Sundance title I really am excited about is The Last Thing He Wanted, which is from Dee Reese.
Oh.
Yeah. It was expected to come out last year. Netflix produced it. Because they had such a big, heavy slate this year of movies, they talked her into pushing it back. So it'll have room to breathe for their slate in 2020. But it's premiering at Sundance, and it's about a journalist who quits her job and becomes an arms dealer. So that sounds fun.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's Anne Hathaway and Ben Affleck and Willem Dafoe. So, yeah. So I'm really excited about that one. I have a few others I'll mention too, but I'll let you go.
All right. Well, I mean, I think that a lot of mine are probably some of the bigger movies because, like, I'm not going to Sundance, obviously, but also just, Yeah, like sometimes you don't know what you're going to be into until they actually come out and you're like, ooh, that sounds really interesting. But one that I was thinking about was Gretel and Hansel. Which is it's a Gretel and Hansel, a grim fairy tale. It's a dark fantasy film based on Hansel and Gretel. Just based on really two things. One is the fact that it is directed and written by Oz Perkins, who also directed and I believe wrote The Black Coat's Daughter, which is one of the best horror films none of you people saw. I think that's on Hulu now, I believe. Oh, okay. But he's actually I believe Tony Perkins' son. Oh. Yes, he's Tony Perkins' son, and just like this is based solely on the trailer. It looks like The Witch, but Hansel and Gretel, which is absolutely 100% right up my alley. So I am very excited about that. I'll be interested to see that when it comes out. I hope that it's good. I mean, there's always a chance that this kind of thing looks good on the surface and then turns out to be awful, but the trailer makes it really look fascinating, and I like those dark, in the woods kind of horror films.
Yeah. Did you know? Well, sorry, The Black Coat's Daughter is on Netflix.
Oh, it's on Netflix now. It's been moving around. Yeah, it's now on Netflix. So I'm looking forward to that. Also, and this was on my list last year. Death on the Nile, which is, I think, finally coming out in 2020. Just Kenneth Branagh and his mustache. Just, I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see that. Another one that I'm cautiously pessimistic about, but I'm kind of interested to see it because I love the book, is Dune. Mm-hmm. Denis Villeneuve's version of Frank Herbert's fantastic sci-fi novel is supposed to come out this year. I really hope that it's good. I pray to God. I don't think it's going to be, but I want it to be. This is one film that I'm really pulling for. Let's see, what else? Oh, another one that I had on was The Invisible Man.
I have that one too.
Okay, yeah, it looks interesting. I initially was like, oh god, they're making The Invisible Man, and then I actually saw the trailer and realized what they were doing with it. Mm-hmm. And if done properly, I think that this could be a really fascinating film.
Yeah. Leigh Whannell makes interesting movies. I don't necessarily love all of them, but interesting nonetheless. I guess he's only done two, but but they're both the two movies that he's done, Insidious 3 and Upgrade, which was out I think last year. Maybe it was the year before. It must have been the year before because it was when Venom came out, and I was like, oh, actually, now that I've seen Upgrade, I realized that Venom is. No, I saw Venom first, no, second. Sorry, I can't talk. I saw Venom second, and then I was like, oh, this makes me retroactively like Upgrade more. It's basically the same movie. And Logan Marshall Green, who you can't tell me is not Tom Hardy, he's in that one, and it's just really funny because Tom Hardy's in Venom, and yeah. Anyway, Leigh Whannell, that should be interesting.
Yes, and I also had Promising Young Woman, which I just recently saw the trailer for. And that one, I think that's actually a woman, Emerald Fennell, in her directorial debut, starring Carey Mulligan and a whole bunch of other people. But again, I know that we shouldn't always judge everything based upon their trailer, but the trailer really made me go this is a movie that I need. This is a movie that I feel is very applicable to our time period.
Yeah, well, and it's one that I got into a discussion with one of my podcast co-hosts from a different podcast, and he was like, I'm so excited for this movie. And I was like, I am only excited because it's not directed by a dude. If this movie were directed by a man, I would not be looking forward to it, but I am.
Yeah, the presence of a female director definitely makes me go,
Yeah.
And interestingly, that was actually something that one of my friends said about Hustlers, because we were talking about that the other day, and she was like, oh no, I don't want to see this. And I said, no, it's directed and written by a woman. She was like, oh! Mm-hmm. It's that, it actually does make a difference.
It really does, yeah. And actually, one of my male colleagues at another outlet didn't like Hustlers. And I'm like, yeah, I bet you would have if a man had directed it. He doesn't like it when I say stuff like that. So a couple of other titles I'm looking forward to. Lauren, did you know there's going to be a Nun 2?
What?
Yep, it comes out in October.
What?
Apparently
Are you serious? Oh my god, it's gonna be so good.
Yep.
I can't wait.
Yeah. And then
What can possibly happen next?
I don't know. But also we're supposed to get The Conjuring 3 this year too. And
yes.
I am so excited. I love those movies. So excited for that. And then of course, Wonder Woman 1984. I think that one goes without saying. I'm really excited about Eternals.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I like the Avengers movies a lot. All of them. But I don't remember the last time I was this excited for one. Probably. At least this far out, you know? So, I'm looking forward to that because that cast just looks amazing. And then, of course, everyone knows Top Gun Maverick is like, I'm already in the theater. I'm just like, mentally I'm there. But also,
you've seen this movie already in your mind, in your dreams.
Oh my gosh.
You've witnessed it.
I had a dream last night. I've been having the weirdest dreams recently. And last night I had a dream that Tom Cruise worked for me in my tutoring center that I run. And people don't really know this, like what I do for my day job, but I run a college tutoring center. And so I had this dream that he was one of my tutors, not like a tutor that looked like him. It was actually him. He worked for me. And I needed to talk to him about something, and I didn't want to because I didn't want him to not like me. And I'm trying to talk to my coworker who's like, you have to go talk to him. And I'm like, but I've loved him since I was 9. Yeah. Oh, also another movie I'm excited for is The Bell Jar.
Oh.
Which, of course, adaptation. But the reason I'm excited, guess who's directing it?
Who? I haven't even heard about this.
Kirsten Dunst.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So
I'd be willing to go for that.
Yeah, so I saw she was directing it and I was like, okay, I will check that out. So Dakota Fanning, Patricia Arquette, Jesse Plemons, Belle Powley, and yeah, that's who's in it. So I don't know. I'm pretty excited. And then Dunst co-wrote the screenplay with someone else. But yeah, it's the adaptation of Sylvia Plath's novel, so that could be interesting. And then I'm just looking through here because I've got a big list of stuff. So also In the Heights.
Yeah.
That looks really good. Did you see the trailer for that one?
I've seen the trailer for that one.
Oh,
Yes,
man.
that looks good too.
Yeah, that's I think that's going to be a good one. And then, of course, Bill and Ted Face the Music.
I was wondering if you were going to get to that one because I was like, she's got to mention Bill and Ted because like otherwise I'm going to mention Bill and Ted.
Oh my gosh. I have been following every bit of like their updates for this movie. I'm so excited.
It looks really cute. I too love Bill and Ted, and I'm excited about it. Even though, again, none of my friends believed that it was an actual thing. I was like, no, they're making a third one. It's like, no, they're not. That's like, you're making that up. It's like, no, they are.
Yep.
There are. It's coming out next year. It's like, no, that's not true. It's like, it is.
The day that they finished filming, I think both the writer and Alex Winter both posted something on Twitter about it, like, oh, we finished principal photography today. And I went and told someone, I was like, oh my gosh, they finished filming Bill and Ted. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, the movie. What? Yeah, like, I don't know how people have missed that there's going to be a third one, but apparently I'm not doing my job.
Well, that was on my list too. Actually, I think that we've covered everything that was on my list.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So anything else that you're like majorly excited for?
You know, I'm also really looking forward to a Disney animated movie coming out called Raya and the Last Dragon.
Huh.
Which I had
I've
not
heard
heard about until I was at D23, and when they were doing their presentation, Jennifer Lee, who is the head of Disney Animation, she introduced this, and it's based on a Chinese legend, I believe, and it's got I'm trying to think. I'm looking it up right now. Adele Kim, who was one of the co-writers on Crazy Rich Asians, is writing it. Does have white dudes directing it, but it's gonna have an actual Asian cast, not a bunch of Asian characters voiced by white people. I know Awkwafina is supposed to be one of the voices in it. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one too.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Oh, and I also am looking forward to Mulan.
Yeah,
the live action version of Mulan. And I know that there have been some issues around the lead, the like more political issues and stuff like that. But the film itself does look really good, and it's one of the few like Disney live action films I'm like, yes, this makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you for actually doing one of the few that makes sense.
Well, when they were talking about remaking them, I was like, I hope they do Mulan, because that's the only one that really feels like it would benefit from a live action remake.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that it will. And some people have been upset about the fact that it's not a musical, and I'm just like, but it's this way it doesn't take anything away from the musical. It's not, oh, well, why should I watch that when I can just watch this? It's like, now you have reasons to watch both of them.
Yeah, it should be a straight action movie, really. I mean, that's what the story is. And I think that it'll work great. So yeah. I am looking forward to that. And the trailers look good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited.
So, anything else? Any major ones? No?
I think that pretty much sums it up.
That's a good list.
That's a great list. We did good.
That's a good list. So why don't we talk about for a little while some films that have recently been released, not absolutely new releases, but ones that have just recently gotten wide releases, or in the case of one of them, been released properly on Netflix, and we got to see that as well. So let's start with Uncut Gems, the film by the Safdie brothers starring Adam Sandler as... I don't even know how to summarize the plot of this movie. As a very high-class jeweler in the Diamond District who gambles way too much and keeps on endangering himself in increasingly horrible ways.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's about it. I mean, I saw this film back before the holidays, back before I left New York. And a number of people had said this, but it was interesting that my experience was very similar, that this is one of the most stressful films to see in a theater. And I agree with that, but what I actually felt was it was incredibly exhilarating. It was stressful in one of the best possible ways for me, in that I was totally immersed in the film. And there came a point where I'm sitting there going like, oh my God, this is one of the worst people on screen, and yet I really, really care what happens. Mm-hmm. Like, I care what is going to happen to this guy, even if it's bad or good or whatever else, but I'm just like, I'm invested in this, you know? And it's so well done. It's such an intense movie, and goes through so many different twists and turns. I really did not know how it was going to come out, how it was going to end. There's one point in the film where I was sitting there just going like, oh my God, no. What is wrong with you? No! And yet I think that the film does a really good job at kind of plunging you into this guy's psyche and into understanding, even if you don't agree with him, which you really shouldn't, understanding why he does what he does and where all of his actions are stemming from. It's a very fascinating film for that kind of focalization, that's sort of embedding yourself in this character. I loved it. I thought it was one of the best films of the year, and for someone who does not particularly like Adam Sandler, he really gives a fantastic performance in this. So what did you think about that, Karen?
So I'm actually still trying to decide. I saw this probably a month ago, and I want to watch it again. It was one where I I agree with what you said completely. I was completely mesmerized by this movie, and just even when it was really stressing me out, and I was just like, I don't know, I can't look, but then I needed to keep looking. I needed to see what was going to happen next and where this was going to go and who was going to come his way and was this going to happen or that, I mean, it was just constantly, I was with it the whole time. And, yeah, for me, it was a stressful experience, but it was also, but there was something about it that didn't make me like too stressed out to keep going, I guess. It was just like, yeah, I can keep watching this. And so, yeah, I was really interested in that. And then it was funny because I think I said this about another movie when we were doing our best of the year, but someone described it as like, oh, I feel like I'm, on a bunch of drugs right now. And I'm just like, I feel like being on a bunch of drugs would be the worst way to watch this movie. Unless you're like smoking some weed and can mellow out. And then you're like, yeah, cool, whatever.
Yeah, you do not want to be on cocaine watching this movie. I think you would just lose your shit.
I cannot imagine. Ooh. But not that I've ever used cocaine. I don't know. But, yeah. I think that, I mean, Adam Sandler, I know that his especially his 90s work, well, and a lot of his current work where he just goes on vacation and makes a movie, people don't really like that. They don't like his characters, but there's always been a really good actor in there. And every once in a while he lets that out. And this is coming from someone who loves Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore. I think they're fun. But they're not great works of performance art necessarily. Mm-hmm. But when you see these types of roles from him, it's this reminder of like, man, yeah, Adam Sandler is really talented. And I like to see those glimpses. And I'm glad that he gave this a shot. I think the Safdie brothers are really interesting directors. I think they have a very particular style. And I'm glad that they have kind of found a way in to share that. And working with A24, it feels like the right studio for them, and they've been able to, in just a few movies, they've been able to put together a really good crew behind the scenes. They're able to get really talented actors. I mean, who knew Kevin Garnett could act? Yeah. And he's really good in it too. And yeah, I think that this is a film that I definitely appreciate. I think it's really good. Where I come down to where I'm not sure how I feel about it is like, I don't know if I liked it, but I know I didn't dislike it.
That's interesting. It's a film I want to see again. I would like to see this again with like other people and see their reactions to it. Mm-hmm. Having seen it once myself and then actually getting to see how they react to the film. I would also be interested to actually see it in I was in a packed movie theater. And so there was definitely a vibe in the theater itself. It would be interesting to see it like, on its own and actually get to process it a little bit more, knowing kind of all of the changes that are going to take place within the film itself. But yeah, it is definitely an interesting film. I would recommend going to see it if you get a chance.
Highly recommend, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the other film that, kind of switching gears completely.
Totally the same type of movie.
Let's talk about The Two Popes. The Netflix film, which was released, I think it was actually released around about Christmas. Yeah, December 20th in the United States on Netflix, which stars Jonathan Pryce as... at the time, Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, who would eventually become the future Pope Francis, and Anthony Hopkins as Pope Benedict XVI. And it is about a particular moment in their relationship and kind of how they relate to one another and their pasts, and particularly Francis's past. And the differences between their religions and their faiths, and how they ultimately, come to sort of a point of understanding, almost, I guess. It's a fascinating film, and probably I would say that it's one of the best films I have seen that really gets into the nuance and complexity of faith. Definitely one of the best recent films that actually deals with this, because it treats their faith, and these are two high-ranking members of the Catholic Church. Obviously, one of them is Pope at the time. And they have completely different outlooks. They have completely different understandings of what Catholicism should be, and not just what Catholicism is, but what the place of the Church is within Catholicism, and what they are supposed to be for their parishioners, for the people, for everybody. But at the same time, they do come to this mode of understanding in arguing with each other pretty constantly. But it's a really fascinating film. I think that both of them give wonderful performances. Jonathan Pryce in particular, like, watching this, I was like, oh, I want him to be my Pope. Like, I'm so glad, I'm not Catholic, but I am aware of the fact that the Pope generally is the representative of, the most visible representative of Christianity in the world. And it's interesting to see kind of this conflict between these two men and what Christianity means to them and what their faiths mean to them. And ultimately knowing, of course, that Francis is going to be Pope, and the approaches that he's going to take to the Church. And the failures also, but also the successes. And so I thought it was a great film. It was a really well-acted film, well put together. It's not preachy. It's not trying to convert anybody. It isn't a faith-based film in that sense. But it's really trying to get at something real and truthful about religion and about the way that human beings just generally relate to one another. So, I know that you liked this film, Karen.
Oh yeah, I loved this movie. It's in my top 20 for the year, and everything that you said about it, I completely agree with. And what I would add is that as much as it doesn't dive deep into faith, it really is about philosophy. And I think that one of the things it does very well, and one of the things I think a lot of people watching this needed to see, was two people who have been raised being taught the exact same things, who've been through the same seminary system, of course in two different countries with totally different teachers, but they've been taught the same lessons, and they come away with it with different understandings of what their belief and their faith and their dogma and all of it means, and they have different interpretations. And I think that, for a lot of people now that are religious and that belong to organized churches, there's this there's kind of this thing happening where a lot of people think, well, I have to believe exactly this and only this. And I think that what the Two Popes shows is that you can reach totally different conclusions by reading the same scripture passage, by hearing the same lessons from the same person. You can draw different conclusions from that, and it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just different ways of looking at the world. So I think that's one really important lesson that I took from the Two Popes. I'm not Catholic either, but I have a lot of family that is, and I, like you said, I know that a lot of people look to the Pope, and even though I'm not Catholic, and even though what he says doesn't exactly have a bearing on my life or on my belief, I still listen to what the Pope has to say because I'm interested in it and I'm curious about it. And I know a lot of people who will take very personal meaning from it. And seeing the background of Francis's life and understanding where he came from also makes it easier for me to see how he's so forward thinking and why he understands the world in a way that he does, because he's lived a life that other popes haven't, the ones that have come before him haven't lived. And he's had experiences. He's made mistakes that were very well known and that affected an entire country. And he's had to live with that. And so it's just interesting to see that, and to see Jonathan Pryce does such a beautiful job of portraying someone who has a lot of, not necessarily guilt anymore, but has learned the lessons of the mistakes of his past. And I think that it really does a good job of showing whether you believe or not, showing why he's such a powerful and important and influential leader. So I think it's just such a beautiful movie. And I love how they managed to make a conversation between two old men, two old priests, basically, really interesting and compelling, and something that I didn't want to turn off. I didn't want to walk away from. And it's funny, it's endearing, it's frustrating at times, and it's just so good.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. I like the fact that there is humor and that there are Francis makes jokes and Benedict makes jokes in a couple of places.
It's a German joke. It doesn't have to be funny.
Exactly. Yeah. No, but there's like this wry humor that's running through it, and these, they start out being guys that don't particularly like each other.
Right.
And particularly those early scenes of them walking in the garden and having those conversations. And I like the fact that it doesn't shy away from actually talking about some of the issues. I was afraid that it was going to just kind of ignore, the sex scandals, the abuse scandals. And it didn't. It actually talked about them head on. And that's not what the film is about, but the film doesn't kind of try to sort of be like, oh, we're not going to talk about that because it's about something else. It's all kind of a part of the world of the Catholic Church, and the fact that the Catholic Church is a religion, and it's also political, and it's political within and without, and like you're saying, it does have a profound effect on real people's lives, and has an effect on politics, and has a relationship to politics. Yeah. And the way that people understand the world, the way that people understand their religion, the way that they understand their belief structures, and belief structures influence society. So yeah, whether or not you are, you're a believer, you're a Catholic, you're a Christian, you're an atheist, it's still interesting to see the depth of, like you're saying, the philosophy and what these things mean and how these mistakes and differences in philosophy can have lasting consequences for good and ill. On the world, on real people in real ways.
Exactly, yeah. I think one of the reasons that it doesn't necessarily shy away from the bigger issues is because of the fact that Fernando Morales, I've seen in a couple of interviews where he's talked about, he is Catholic, but he's kind of a lapsed Catholic. Like, he's not really, maybe that's changed, maybe it hasn't, I don't know. But, he's not one of those that goes to church faithfully, and he's, he was baptized and that kind of thing. And so I think not being completely entrenched in it helps you kind of take that step back and be more objective and tell a more honest story. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. So yeah, it is a good film. I do suggest that everybody, regardless of your beliefs, like I said, this is not really a faith-based film in any sense. Go see it. It's on Netflix. You really don't have an excuse.
It's in your TV already.
Yeah, and if just to watch Anthony Hopkins and Vince and I want to say Vincent Price, Jonathan Price. See, I always go to the one Price. And Jonathan Price actually interact with each other and give just wonderful performances. It's a surprising film in a lot of ways, so I really recommend it.
I'm so glad you watched it, and I'm so glad you loved it.
Yeah, it was great. So I think that's going to close this out. What do you have on tap, Karen? Anything fascinating?
Oh my gosh. Well, this Friday, this is Friday. This Sunday is the Golden Globes, so I'll be watching those. I'm not going to be at the Golden Globes, but then I've got the Hollywood Critics Association, which I'm in. We're going to have our awards next Thursday, and it's like a fancy dinner and everything. So I'll be at that. And then next weekend, I'm going to the Critics' Choice Awards.
Must be nice.
I know. It's kind of crazy. It's like, oh, wow, I need dresses.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, so fancy.
I know.
So fancy. Well, I am going to go see Cats this weekend. So there.
I'm just going to go see Jojo Rabbit again.
I can't wait to see Cats, honestly. Like, I've had a couple of friends be like, please, please, please write a review. I was like, oh, you know it. You know that there's going to be a review.
Yeah. Knowing you and how much you enjoy bad movies, I think you will definitely find things to like about it. I just was so bored.
That's what I'm worried about. I'm actually worried about being bored.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I still have to see it. I have to know.
But I mean, Idris Elba is naked, basically. And that's weird.
That's not boring. That's not boring.
It's not. It's just a little weird because you're like, wait, is he actually naked right now? And so then you're just staring at it, trying to figure out. And then also Rebel Wilson unzips her fur and is wearing clothes underneath.
Yes, I've actually seen that clip now.
Yeah,
and
that's weird.
I would like to unsee it.
Yeah. Well, you can't.
And I'm going to see it again, apparently.
You are twice.
So that's what I'm up to.
Have fun.
So,
are you going to drink more grape vodka?
Oh, God. Never again.
You should probably drink it while you're watching Cats.
Never again. Never again. That stuff's evil. I would just want to say to everybody, first of all, grape vodka, who the fuck distills vodka from grapes? Like, that's insane. That's actually insane. And also, it's terrible, and also, I almost died. No. No, I just did not feel well the next morning, that's all.
Or 3 days later.
Or 3 days later. It was a good time. So that is going to wrap us up for this, our first recorded episode of 2020. Thank you so much for listening to us. As always, you can get in touch with us so many different ways. We are on Twitter at CitizenDamePod and Instagram at CitizenDamePod. Facebook.com/CitizenDame. Send us an email, citizendamepod@gmail.com. Of course, you can go to our website, and there probably will be a Cats review coming up at some point within the next week, as soon as I get other deadlines finished. So that's citizendamepod.com. Of course, we are always really grateful for our patrons. Thank you so much, guys. You're helping us to continue to do this and actually pay for hosting and things like that. So we always welcome more patrons. We do at patreon.com/citizendame. And hopefully we will actually be able to get up some more bonus content and stuff like that once everything has calmed down again. Is it ever calm? That's the question.
No.
We also have a Zazzle Store, zazzle.com/citizendame, and that has buttons on it. And I'm going to go buy some buttons eventually just because I want some buttons. We also have a Ko-Fi account. That's ko-fi.com/citizendame if you want to give us a couple of bucks, but you don't really want to make the commitment to be a patron. So, and otherwise, of course, you can get in touch with us many different ways. Karen, where are you?
I am on Twitter and Instagram at Karen M. Peterson.
And I am on Twitter and Instagram at LHBusiness. So that's going to close us out for this week. We will talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Your style and your methods are entirely different to mine. I don't agree with most of the things you say, think, or do, but for some strange reason, now I can see a necessity for Bergoglio. But I cannot do this without knowing that there is at least a possibility that you might be chosen.
No. It could never be me.
All right? We are at an impasse. You cannot retire from the church unless I agree to your going, and I cannot resign until you agree to stay.